Chapter 80. A traitor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The word traitor seemed to be too distant from the students. Enough that Lu Dezhu couldn't even believe what he heard. Qin Chen got a chair and sat down in front of him. Please remember exactly what I say next because it will be a matter of life and death for you. My men told me that the 5 escaping thugs are surrounding Yunshanyin. They are carrying guns and will probably hold everyone hostage. They are only observing from a distance, so they aren't sure if you're in there yet. Lu Dezhu was shocked. A second ago, he was still relaxed and prepared to deal with Qin Chen, testing if his boss realized that he got 2 gold bars instead of 1. But a second later, he realized that he and his classmates might be in danger at any moment. Lu Dezhu jumped up from his bed and was about to cry, "Boss, are your men nearby? Please save me." Those from Kunlun said these people are ruthless. Qin Chen looked at him with a sense of disgust. Calm down. You can live for at least 2 more days, and they are kidnapping you for your status in the inner world, not to just kill you. Lu Dezhu said, but that won't do either. Being a mule for these people is also very dangerous, and Kunlun said they kill anyone who isn't a time traveler. We have 40 classmates here. That's 40 lives. Qin Chen was stunned. They kill ordinary people. That's bad. Nangingchen is in danger. No one knew that Nangingchen was a time traveler yet. After being silent for a while, Qin Chen said, I need you to do 2 things for me when you get back. Please tell me, boss. Lu Dezhu sat up straight. Qin Chen said, first, I want you to tell all the classmates to scatter. That way, at least the thugs won't catch all of you at once. Don't ask other tourists for help, because that will only bring innocent people into this. The thugs have guns with them, and their target is time travelers, not ordinary people. Lu Dezhu asked sternly, boss, will we be able to escape? Qin Chen said, you can only bet that they haven't fully surrounded the place. There's nothing else you can do about it. Lu Dezhu remembered this. Qin Chen continued, second, in case you weren't able to escape, you'll probably be gathered together in one place. At that time, I want you to find the students from High City and ask each of them separately if anyone was left alone after being kidnapped that night. Also, you have to think about if anyone left after you arrived at the mountain or if anyone was on the phone messaging the whole time. Lu Dezhu said, are you thinking that a traitor would be one of them? Although it might sound outrageous, that's the most reasonable guess I can think of, answered Qin Chen. Because the thugs only came in contact with 4 people recently. Although the thugs that came in contact with them directly were already arrested, who knew what happened after that? Of course, other students can't be completely ruled out. You don't have to do anything for the next 2 days, just think about how you can save yourself. After saying all this, Qin Chen turned and left the confinement room. 2 more days until the next transmigration. He had to think about what he had to do. But just as he was about to step out the door, he suddenly turned and stared at Lu Dezhu dead in the eyes. Qin Chen felt like he was missing something. The most important information. Instantly, Qin Chen's pupils changed, and his blood seemed to be boiling. He strolled across his memories. There must be a clue. Footsteps, explosions, gunshots, fragmented but action-packed. Qin Chen seemed to have returned to Jiang Shui's destroyed apartment. He looked around calmly and thought, after the thugs came to Luo City, they kidnapped 3 time travelers already, and Jiang Shui was the 4th. The thugs never wanted to kidnap Lu Dezhu. They didn't dare to, nor was it worth it. That was because they thought Lu Dezhu was Li Shutong's student. If they caught Lu Dezhu, they had to bet that Lu Dezhu wouldn't find them in the inner world and kill them while they were transmigrating. If they lost, they would lose their lives. These thugs would always control the mules in the inner world so they could be used to carry valuables, but since Lu Dezhu was in the prison, they had no way of controlling him. So, their target wasn't Lu Dezhu. It was Hu Xiaonyo and his friends. These students from High City could not only be used as mules but also be used to get ransom from their rich families. They didn't take action before midnight probably because they wanted to keep Lu Dezhu in the dark during the transmigration to the inner world. This way, they would have at least 2 whole days to deal with the situation. Lu Dezhu would be the first to be killed. Qin Chen asked Lu Dezhu, who proposed to change this trip. Lu Dezhu said weakly, a student named by Weiner from the class next door. Qin Chen was surprised, by Weiner. This doesn't make sense. He didn't ask anything else and left the confinement room. Walking inside the dim corridor, Yiwan said curiously, looks like a lot has happened during the 2 days. Yeah, Qin Chen nodded, someone wants to kidnap the time travelers and use them to carry items. Only 4 of the 9 ruthless criminals have been arrested so far. The last 5 are all at the BB Lu Dezhu is in. What's BB? Lin Xiaoxiao asked. Just a place to live near a tourist attraction, explained Qin Chen. Will you be in danger? Asked Yiwan. I'm not sure if it will affect me yet, said Qin Chen, removing his cat face mask, and I don't care if Lu Dezhu ends up dead or alive. He looked at the gold bars in his hand. Now that Lu Dezhu finally has set up a steady source of income for him, all the efforts might perish again. But none of these mattered. He was just worried that Nanjingchen might die. Let's go, said Qin Chen to Yiwan. Where to? Asked Yiwan, confused. Training, of course, answered Qin Chen as if it was obvious. Yiwan and Lin Xiaoxiao looked at each other. None of them expected that Qin Chen's will was that strong. A moment ago, he was still dealing with a life-threatening crisis. Now, he was back to his usual training just like a normal day. Qin Chen looked at their astonished expression and said calmly, there's nothing else I can do before I return. It's better to use this time to become stronger so that when I do face this kind of situation in the future, I will no longer be so powerless. Lin Xiaoxiao was deeply moved. This teenager was indeed the most suitable person to inherit the boss's position. Qin Chen never saw many life and death moments yet but was still able to calmly suppress his inert sense of panic and choose the best path at a complicated crossroad. Chapter 81. The Fragility of Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The night in prison 18 was as quiet as ever. When Qin Chen returned to the training area, Li Shutong was standing steadily on top of the horizontal bar, calmly looking at the e-reader containing the outer world chess endgames that Lin Xiaoxiao had helped him to extract. Upon seeing Qin Chen coming back, this teacher spoke with a smile, looking at your face, it seems like you've met a trouble. Qin Chen threw the USB flash drive in his hand to Lin Xiaoxiao, and then said to Li Shutong, this is all the classical music scores I could find in the outer world, it should be enough for another chance to trade with teacher. Oh. Li Shutong's interest was piqued. Then what do you wish to obtain from me this time? Helping you get through this difficulty. Qin Chen shook his head, I've said before, I will undertake my own road, so teacher should just consider this trading opportunity as something you owe me for now. Li Shutong leaped off the horizontal bar, his body floating down from the air like a weightless feather, not even making the slightest sound as he landed on the ground. He gracefully smiled and said, I rarely owe anyone in this life, the feeling of owing someone is something I'm truly not used to. You should hurry up and think of what you need, and let me complete the exchange so I can feel better. Did the teacher ever owe anyone else? Asked Qin Chen curiously. I did, Li Shutong chuckled, but that person hates me to the bones now, it won't be good to meet again. I can only repay what I owe in the next life. Qin Chen felt there was a deep story in it. He heard Li Shutong continue speaking, I can see you've bumped into a big problem this time, but I won't help you. I won't do it even if you wanted to use this chance to exchange for my help. You're clear. Headed enough not to ask me for help, it proves that I didn't judge you wrongly. Qin Chen understood that assisting him to gain a foothold, and expand his foundation and wings in the outer world were things Li Shutong didn't mind doing. But once he encountered real danger, the man would not take care of it. Lin Xiaoxiao muttered on the side, "Boss, if you really won't worry about it, I'll see whether or not you'll be sad when he died in the outer world." Li Shutong smiled, "There's a type of falcon called the Qingshan falcon in this world. When they become adults, even floating ships will not be able to handle them. But they are very timid when young, not daring to take flight by themselves. There are 7 hatchlings in every batch, and when it's time for them to mature, the adult Qingshan falcons will grab all 7 of their chicks to the edge of a cliff and push them down one by one. Those who spread their wings will live, and those who continue to shirk will fall and die at the bottom of the cliff. At the average, Qingshan falcons need to breed 2 batches of hatchlings for a single survivor to emerge," Li Shutong continued, "but the one who survives will become the ruler of the sky the moment it's able to fly." Qing Chen was intrigued. "There's no Qingshan falcon in the outer world, is it very powerful?" Of course, Li Shutong recalled, without the protection of a first-class floating ship, human beings won't dare to provoke them. "I accidentally entered their territory when I did my third life and death challenge many years ago and was chased by one of the Qingshan falcons for more than 15 kilometers. I almost died there." When Qing Chen thought about a person like Li Shutong being chased to the point of fleeing in disarray when he was young, he felt it was really amazing. At this time, Li Shutong suddenly said, "Aside from superhuman, forbidden lands can also form after the deaths of other exceptional creatures. For example, after a Qingshan falcon dies, the plants around its corpse will become stronger and even develop offensive abilities, because these powerful plants would in turn need more nutrients. Is there a way to suppress the corruption?" Qing Chen asked. "This situation is like an increasing entropy. If forbidden lands are allowed to spread, then in a few hundred years, would there be no land left for humans to inhabit? Increasing entropy, using the forbidden lands of the inner world as an example, meant that the area would never naturally decrease, instead increasing in a constant but irregular manner. Until the day it engulfed the whole world. The taboo tribunal was unable to eliminate it, they could only constrain the rate of its spread. There is no way to suppress it," said Li Shutong, "this might be the principle of the purification of the earth. Maybe one day giant creatures such as dinosaurs will reappear. Birds of prey like Qingshan falcons are similar to pterosaurs from ancient times. At that time, the earth was different from how it is now." "How would humans do?" asked Qing Chen. "At that time, perhaps only superhumans can continue to survive," Li Shutong chuckled. "Humans always think they're the rulers of the earth, but this world will tell you through time that there's no such thing as a true ruler. Do you want to go on a trip? I'll take you to see the real forbidden land." Qing Chen shook his head. "Wait till next time, teacher. These 2 days I have to think about how to handle things when I return." Lin Xiaoxiao could clearly see an unexpected look of regret on Li Shutong's face. But he heard Li Shutong speak, "Have you figured out how to deal with it?" Qing Chen thought about it and said, "Murder." "Then do you know how to kill?" Li Shutong asked. "I don't know, but I can learn," replied Qing Chen. Both Lin Xiaoxiao and Yi Wan sighed. The conversation between these 2 people was really clear. Cut and straightforward. Qing Chen said, "I thought of a way, that is to have Yi Wan train me these 2 days to let me remember all kinds of fighting skills and the reactions the enemy would make when we fight so I could take the lead in battles. But later I found that while the method is feasible, there's not enough time. It's like playing chess, right?" Li Shutong fell into thought. Exhaustive search, or brute force search, was a type of problem-solving technique. When someone made a move, you had to think of all possible ways to deal with it, as well as all the possibilities of the opponent's next step, and then choose the most optimal solution. The way Qing Chen played chess was to remember all the possible developments of the game, such that the moment his opponent made a move, he already knew all the required steps to respond to it. Yi Wan explained, "With the breathing technique, plus your continuous practice, your physical quality has reached the basic level of a soldier. But if your opponent is equipped with mechanical limbs, you still have no clear edge over them. Is my physique adequate?" Qin Chen asked. It is, Yi Wan replied, but can your reflex keep up? What I'm saying is, when your brain has already processed all the possibilities, can you instantly pick the most optimal choice and make your body do the corresponding action? This time, Li Shutong interjected, there are many bones in the human body. 29 bones comprising the skull, 51 trunk bones including 26 vertebrae, 64 upper limb bones, and 62 lower extremity bones. The human body also has 12 large joints and 210 small joints. It has about 639 muscles, composed of approximately 6 billion muscle fibers. Li Shutong said, the human body has way more possibilities than chess, so don't try to master the exhaustive method within 2 days. In reality, just one move is enough to kill a person. Qin Chen listened to Li Shutong, who resumed talking. Yi Wan, you only need to teach him one move, and then tell him the possible ways the enemy would counter. It will be much simpler this way. Yi Wan pondered, boss, will one move be enough? Li Shutong smiled, enough, after all, life is very fragile. Qin Chen thought about it and said, 2 nights may not be enough. Li Shutong simply waved his hand indifferently, then just lock all the other prisoners in their cells and only allow them to come out during mealtime. Have them scram off for the rest of the time. In this way, you can also train during the day. Qin Chen was stunned on the spot. Despite stating that he would not help, his teacher still moved and involved so many people just for him. Chapter 82. Vital Organs and Biomimetic Skin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The prison had more than 3,000 inmates, yet just because Li Shutong wanted to give his student more time to train, he simply stopped all of them from coming out. It was as if the prison's existence was for Qin Chen. After Li Shutong went to bed in his room, Li Shutong exclaimed, our boss is still as stubborn as ever. Yi Wan thought about it and said, after all, Qin Chen is Knight's only hope right now, so it's not a surprise that the boss would do everything he can. By the way, said Lin Xiaojiao, I killed the 2 assassins you caught earlier. Qin Chen. Lin Xiaoxiao added, don't worry, I got what we need before they died. It's the Qin family's 4th branch coming for you, but we still aren't sure why. Only now did Qin Chen notice that this smiling young man had a ruthless side. He was ruthless toward the enemy and kind toward his friends. At this time, Yi Wan suddenly said, there is one thing that we have always found to be very strange. From what we can tell, it seems that the elders of the Qin Corporation know your existence, and you even have a marriage arranged with the Kamadai family. But the problem is that few people outside have heard of you. Before you transmigrated, you were the only descendant who was never involved in any corporational activities and was never seen in public. Qin Chen frowned, maybe because I'm not important, and no one wants to care about me. Lin Xiaoxiao shook his head, if we assume that, then how were you able to replace the 3rd branch to enter the fight for the shadow? If you are important, then how come even descendants from the side branches get more attention than you? Besides, said Yi Wan, I can't find any information about you on the internet, almost like you don't exist. It's not that you aren't famous, but that someone deliberately erased something. It's paradoxical. After that, Yi Wan and Lin Xiaoxiao looked at Qin Chen. Qin Chen raised his eyebrows and said, what are you looking at me for? I don't know what's going on either. Whatever, you're so boring, said Lin Xiaoxiao disappointedly as he walked away, I've been curious about this for a while now, and I thought you would be able to give me an answer. Yi Wan said, no time to waste, we should start training. Before we start, I want to restate what boss said earlier. Life is indeed extremely fragile, and just knowing one method is enough for you to kill a person. Sternum rupture could result in obstructed breathing, ruptured alveoli, and ultimately suffocation. Spleen rupture would lead to fatal bleeding and can result in death in a short period of time. So targeting any part of the body with enough force would be able to make the opponent incapacitated. L.C. However, the times have changed, and many fighters could rebuild themselves in order to reduce the damage from fatal hits. Some would implant a biomimetic alloy skin around the neck area to prevent the enemy from cutting their throats. Some would also modify their joints so that they could withstand more impact. But there was a place that was often overlooked by mechanical fighters. Interior organs. Qin Chen felt that something was wrong there. Hold up, if everyone knows that organs are the most important and fragile parts of the body, it would only make sense that people implement biomimetic skin there. Yi Wan said, oh, that's because the biomimetic skin was very expensive. 1 square centimeter costs over $100,000. Under normal circumstances, only a few people could afford to protect their organs, simply because organ surface area is too large. Qin Chen was shocked, so it's wealth that limited people's capacity. Yi Wan continued, from what you told me, the mechanical limbs that the thugs have aren't the best, so they probably don't that organ protective measures. In other words, Yi Wan meant that they probably were too poor to afford large areas of biomimetic alloy skin. The spleen is different, mainly because of its rigid positioning. It's not protected by the spine nor the ribs, and it could be stabbed from the front or the back. Yi Wan explained, most importantly, very few people know how to properly protect it. As long as one was stabbed in the spleen, then the person would almost definitely bleed to death. Will you be able to get a blade after you get back? Asked Yi Wan. Qin Chen thought about it and said, will a fruit knife work? No, said Yi Wan, if it's an ordinary fruit knife that's not sharpened, it won't even pierce the jackets. As he talked, he walked up to the 6th floor, opened an alloy door, and took out a switchblade from one of the cell rooms. The prisoner of the cell was still asleep, and when he was woken up by the sound of the door opening, he just sternly saw Yi Wan coming in, taking the knife, and leaving. Every motion was smooth and natural. Yi Wan placed the palm-sized switchblade in Qin Chen's hand. You should be able to bring items back, so use this to fight. Qin Chen was stunned for a bit. Can't you give me something more advanced? Yi Wan shook his head. Boss won't allow it. So, should I practice with this as well? Asked Qin Chen. Yep, nodded Yi Wan, you not only need to be familiar with the methods of attack and defense but also with your weapon. Got it, so what are we going to do now? Asked Qin Chen. To attack accurately, you first have to know your target well, said Yi Wan, but because everyone's height, weight, and bones are different, their vital points might also be different. You need to kill a lot of people as practice before being able to find the exact spot every time. Yi Wan then handed him a pair of glasses. Use them for night vision. Suddenly, the entire prison went dark. Yi Wan brought Qin Chen to a cell, and after the alloy doors were opened, Mom Yi went in first to press the prisoner solidly in the bed, much like when he was holding Lu Dezhu down. He didn't care about the struggling prisoner but pointed toward a spot under the prisoner's ribs and said to Qin Chen, look, this is the vital spot for his spleen. 1 stab here is enough to take his life. Then, Yi Wan brought Qin Chen to the next cell. To save time, he didn't say anything unnecessary. Again, he held down the terrified and confused prisoner while explaining to Qin Chen how this person was different and why. From 1 to 6 in the morning, Yi Wan spent 5 hours walking Qin Chen through the entire inmate population. Qin Chen felt like he was learning anatomy, but unlike ordinary medical students, he had more than 3,000 real bodies to gain more experience. For Qin Chen, it was a fulfilling night. But for the other prisoners in Prison 18, it was a horrifying experience. They all experienced almost the same thing. Their cell doors suddenly opened, and it was pitch black outside. Then a man powerfully pressed them against their bed and said, look, this is where his spleen is. Stab here and he'll be dead. It was more frightening than watching a virtual reality thriller. Chapter 83. Combat and Comprehension. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you were weaker than your opponent, then your best method would be launching a sneak attack. However, Yi Wan said one shouldn't always expect to be doing a sneak attack. While it was important, to insist only on planning out sneak attacks meant that you could only wait and rely on opportunities. Tirelessly, Qin Chen kept on practicing his movements without a halt. He held a real switchblade in his hand, and his opponent was not the empty air but Yi Wan, who was genuinely made up of flesh and blood. Yi Wan was like a mountain, easily parrying him no matter how ferociously Qing Chen attacked. If the first step was recognizing the vital point, then they were now on to the second step. Combat routines. Logically, piercing the spleen could only be done from a few angles. Yi Wan was teaching him how to mask his intention and let his opponents misjudge the target of his attack so that they would leave the gateway to the spleen wide open. If you directly reveal your intentions, you'll remain at a disadvantage in the battle, said Yi Wan. When you don't have the strength to oppressively crushing someone, feinting is your most effective killing technique. Qing Chen fell into deep thought. He had regarded this too simply before, thinking he just had to learn to do straight stabs, side stabs, and the likes. Unexpectedly, what Yi Wan taught him were combat routines. Like how to skillfully swing the knife towards his opponent's neck and then draw in his elbow and waist the moment the opponent made a move to block it, changing the trajectory of the knife in his hand to stab their spleen. Yi Wan taught him more than 60 other routines similar to that. More than 10 of them included 2 feints. Yi Wan said, "You have to remember one thing, a fight is always unpredictable. Those masterful dagger wielders can strike many times within a second, but in fact, the real attack is hidden between one of those strikes." Close combat was the most dangerous psychological game. What Yi Wan could do was teach Qing Chen these practical routines, so that he would be able to master the most basic killing ability within 2 days. And what Qing Chen needed to do was to imprint all these things into his brain. The third and final step. Actual combat. Solely remembering the routines was not enough. Yi Wan believed Qing Chen also had to clearly grasp the extent of his body's capability. He must have a complete understanding of his own power and speed. Aside from knowing his enemy, he had to know about himself. In just 3 hours, Qing Chen was thoroughly exhausted by this training method where he had to exert all of his strength each time he tried. On top of it, he had been standing behind the window for the first half of the night the day before. By 9 in the morning, he was already a little unresponsive. At this point, 2 hours and 40 minutes had passed since the scheduled mealtime. The prison inmates eventually realized that something was wrong, and everyone began to frantically bang on the doors. But no matter how hard they slammed, nobody responded. It was as if every single door was broken. Guo Huchan was the most violent among them, smashing his door as his life depended on it. It was only after Li Shutong stopped by his cell and warned him that this bald man finally stopped. Instead of getting angry, Guo Huchan smiled and asked enthusiastically, "Boss Li, can you tell me what kind of secret operation are you doing? How about letting me go out to help you? In black spades, I'm also considered an expert at cooking up plans." But Li Shutong didn't give him any shred of acknowledgement. Gradually, the prisoners turned silent once again. They recalled the horror of last night and suddenly felt that this prison seemed to have changed. All of these people were felons, and more than half of them had been here for more than 5 years. They had never experienced such a bizarre thing before. They would have never thought that all this happened just because a teenager was facing a crisis and his teacher wanted to buy him some time, simple as that. When Yi Wan said he could take a break, Qing Chen tilted his head and slumped on the floor, falling asleep straight away. Lin Xiaoxiao came over carrying a food platter. He watched as the fire patterns on Qing Chen's face slowly disappeared, and then lifted him up. "Don't let the inmates out, for now, it's going to look suspicious if Qing Chen's the only one who doesn't go out to eat. Let's wait until he wakes up to start the mealtime." Yi Wan nodded, "But he'll definitely sleep until dinner, so the inmates are going to miss 2 meals. Lin Xiaoxiao cheerfully replied, "It's okay, the boss said they won't die just from having 2 fewer meals." When Qing Chen first came into contact with Li Shutong and his people, their attitude towards him was actually already relatively kind. Up to this day, he had yet to truly meet the other side of the Knights and the Han group. The cold and cruel side. When dinner time arrived, the alloy gates of the cells were opened only after Qing Chen woke up. The prisoners didn't dare to make any noise throughout the duration of the meal, for fear of attracting more trouble. If they were to be used as practice dummies in the middle of the night again, what were the chances that it wouldn't merely be verbal instructions this time? After dinner, the prison announcement ordered everyone to return to the cell, and all of the prisoners followed along. Li Shutong stared at Qing Chen with interest. "How is it, have you grasped the hang of it?" Qing Chen reflected, "Quite okay, since memory and thinking ability play a bigger role in combat than I initially thought. It's just that I haven't trained using the breathing technique for long, so my physical fitness is still lacking. I'll train harder after this." Although he could surpass the result other people obtained in half a month in just one day by using the breathing technique, his training time was still too short. Up until this point, it had only been about 10 days, and even that was also due to his training volume exceeding Yi Wan's plan. Lin Xiaoxiao turned to look at Yi Wan. "According to your standards, how's the progress of his training?" Yi Wan thought about it and said, "Ordinary people are certainly far behind compared to him. When I first learned dagger combat routines, it took 3 months for me to get to his current level. Hyperthymesia is indeed terrifying. If he continues to practice tonight and tomorrow, killing someone won't be a problem." "What about weaknesses?" asked Lin Xiaoxiao. Yi Wan replied, "He didn't have enough actual combat experience and is too formulaic. It's not a problem against ordinary people, but he'll suffer a big loss against real fighters. It all depends on comprehension." Just like Qing Chen playing chess opposite Li Shutong, despite him knowing all about the possible steps and progressions, he was still unable to beat Li Shutong sometimes. He obviously could have won, but was instead forced to a draw. This was the reason why he never participated in major chess competitions. Yi Wan looked at Qing Chen and smiled. "Did you sleep well?" "I did." "We can continue," Qing Chen nodded. The breathing technique had brought his stamina back to full again. "Come on, I'll practice with you," Lin Xiaoxiao offered happily. After speaking, he moved to stand in the field and beckoned to Qing Chen with his hand. Qing Chen took a moment to think, then promptly stepped out with force, swinging down the switchblade in his hand towards Lin Xiaoxiao's thigh. Lin Xiaoxiao grinned. "This kind of feint is too naive, shit. I almost jinxed myself." As the tip of Qing Chen's switchblade was pricking on his leg, he clamped it with his fingers. Fortunately, his reaction was swift, he would have bled otherwise. Qing Chen was stunned. Previously, Lin Xiaoxiao told him he wasn't talented in combat and was more of an ability user. But even so, he was able to stop the blade just by using 2 fingers, which was incredible. There was an insurmountable gap between superhuman and ordinary people. The only one able to engage in close combat with a superhuman was either another superhuman or martial art master with cutting-edge mechanical limbs. Lin Xiaoxiao ranted angrily, "Didn't you say you specialize in attacking the spleen? You put strength in your waist just now, why didn't you raise the knife? Where's the feint attack that you said you'll do?" Li Shutong smilingly turned to Yi Wan. "How is his comprehension?" Yi Wan answered, "I wasn't as good as him back then. Keep practicing, don't slack off." Li Shutong left for the reading area with a big laughter. Looks like this training is already adequate for now. It's time to teach him how to do sneak attacks," replied Yi Wan. Chapter 84. Sneak Attack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. How to maximize gains when facing 5 opponents. Even people without much fighting experience would answer sneak attack. When one attacks a place where no one expected and uses the weirdest angles, it would be the most energy-consuming yet critical tactic. And the battle that Qing Chen was about to face would require him to use this surprise attack to maximize the number of thugs eliminated. Yi Wan also knew about this but was hesitant to teach Qing Chen sneak attack techniques. Qing Chen was confused, but he didn't ask. Battling with Lin Xiaoxiao proved Qing Chen's determination. Since then, Li Shutong stopped caring about this and was fully devoted to the new music scores that he got his hands on. 6 hours of training, then 1 hour of rest. With the help of the breathing technique, Qin Chen was sharpening himself faster than anyone could imagine. And this difficult training resulted in him attacking faster and more accurately. More than 3,000 prisoners still remained in their cells, but this time, no one made a sound. On the second night that Qin Chen transmigrated, the prisoners all lay on their beds, feeling defeated as they experienced the familiar procedure once again. This time, Yi Wan didn't even have to control the prisoners. He just stood in the dark and ordered, lie face down on the bed. The prisoners would cooperatively turn on their beds. Then, Yi Wan said to Qin Chen, I led you through the front last night, and today, we'll be going through the back. In fact, finding the spleen from the back is harder, and to ensure the stab is quick enough, you might want to use your left hand. One by one, the prisoners were forced to lie face down on the bed. The sadness from humiliation could be felt throughout the prison. They were wondering if the next night, he would be back again to find their spleen from the side. Return countdown 15. Midnight, 9 o'clock in the morning. The alloy prison gates suddenly opened. 2 robotic prison guards entered the open area and said to Qin Chen with their speakers on their chests, Prisoner 010101, you have a visitor. Yi Wan smiled, 2 guards already. Qin Chen turned and asked, is there a difference? Yeah, Yi Wan explained, one will estimate the prisoner's threat potential and arrange an appropriate number of guards. Before you only need 1, and now you need 2. Lin Xiaoxiao said, looks like you are more of a threat to it. 1. Qin Chen was still in the blue. Was the entire prison managed by AI? So, that's why he hasn't even seen a single human guard yet. At this time, Li Shutong looked up from his classical sheet music and studied Qin Chen carefully, it should be the girl from the Kamadai family. You are soaking wet right now. It'll be the best for you to get changed first. Qin Chen shook his head, no need. Li Shutong was stunned for a moment, you don't care about others' impressions of you at all. I did some research for you. This girl was as clean as a blank sheet of paper, unlike some others from the Kamadai family. In the end, Qin Chen explained, now the entire prison has been closed off just to hide my identity. Although no one walked out of their cells, it's easy enough to tell that Yi Wan's teaching me how to kill someone. Just that they don't know who he's teaching. If I go see her at this time and later the times were matched up, everyone would know that Yi Wan was teaching me. Qin Chen looked toward Li Shutong, so teacher, I can't go see her right now. Let's continue. Sure. Looking at Qin Chen's seriousness, Li Shutong was in a bit of shock, somehow, your words make so much sense. Return countdown 9.00.00. Yi Wan was walking barefooted on the floor, and Qin Chen was lying on the floor right next to him watching his movements, with a pair of eyes following the pair of large feet. It was as if whenever the sole of the foot moved, it was a different mystery uncovered. Yi Wan's feet were large. Surprisingly large. But even with their size, Qin Chen found that whether they were running or walking, they wouldn't make a bit of sound. This power was peculiar. Every strand of muscle fiber exerted power sequentially. From the sole, to heel, then calf, and finally thigh, every movement was carefully calculated. But Yi Wan didn't have such computational power. It was all experience and muscle memory from the years of training that he got. Qin Chen remembered everything in his mind. He knew that this final lesson was the most important. Unknowingly, Qin Chen closed his eyes. He seemed to have fallen asleep, but he also looked like he was thinking. Lin Xiaoxiao, who was beside Li Shutong, said quietly, Boss, he'll be worn out like this before it all happens. We can't rush him. Should I prepare him with some more lethal weapons? There are plenty of small items that he can carry. Grenade or mini pistol will be perfect for him. Li Shutong shook his head, first time seeing blood requires full effort. Even if he crushes his tooth, he'll still have to remember every bit of the process when taking a person's life with his own hands. When the dagger penetrates the enemy's body and the blood comes down from the blade to your hand while still carrying its warmth, the unforgettable sensation would let him realize what is death. Return countdown 2.00.002 more hours before returning. A sudden turn of hydraulics sounded consecutively in the darkness. Perfectly synchronized. In the long and dark hallway, 21 confinement rooms were opened one after the other. Jian Xing was moved to another prison, and Lu Dezhu was the only person here. Looking at the dark outside world in a daze, he asked, "Anyone there?" No response. He raised his voice, "Anyone there?" Why did the door open? Still no response. After a very long time, he finally gained enough courage to step outside. The hallway was empty, and the door to the prison square was also opened for him. Lu Dezhu was trembling as he moved forward. At this moment, he suddenly felt that something was wrong and turned around abruptly. But nothing there in the obscure hallway behind him. There was only one confinement room where he could see some shadows from the light inside. Lu Dezhu felt like he was playing a game called Silent Hill. Instantly, the world seemed to have changed for him, quiet and horrifying. Only he and the hallway was left in this entire world, and danger could appear around every corner. He started sprinting as fast as he could. He turned around to look as if something was chasing after him as he ran. But Lu Dezhu couldn't hear any footsteps, nor could he see anyone. Vaguely, he could hear meticulously long breathing in a strange frequency. Sometimes, he could hear footsteps aside from his, but no matter where he looked, he couldn't see anything, which further expanded his fears. He gasped as he ran behind the bookshelf in the reading area and carefully looked back. Still nothing. The next moment, he turned around in fear and saw a cat face mask right in front of his eyes. Chapter 85. Scream and Silencer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fuck. Lu Dezhu was scared out of his mind, nearly knocking over the bookshelf in his retreat. In the dark and gloomy atmosphere deep into the night, he saw a strange mask the moment he turned around. This kind of feeling was terribly frightening. It was like having a first-hand experience inside a horror movie. Soon, Yiwan and Lin Xiaoxiao walked out from the shadow of the bookshelf. Lu Dezhu was struck with a realization. These three teamed up and suddenly released him in the middle of the night just to toy with him. He bitterly cried out, "You guys are too ruthless. Stop babbling, you're only useful for things like this." Lin Xiaoxiao dragged Lu Dezhu back to the confinement room. Yiwan told Qin Chen, "You've made a lot of progress in the details, but our training is too rushed. The whole operation isn't really well done." Qin Chen carefully listened. The most important thing about a sneak attack is not to be discovered. There was a slight change in the air and sound inside the corridor because you were too hasty when you made your first approach. Lu Dezhu couldn't detect it by himself, but his body would alert him, continued Yiwan. And then when he picked up his pace, your breathing and footsteps were not well controlled. Those sounds were like drumbeats to my ears, and even Lu Dezhu could sense it. If you replaced him with a well-trained soldier, you'd already be dead now. Okay, I'll keep on training hard. Qin Chen walked on the floor with his bare feet. The biggest secret to walking noiselessly lied in knowing how to control the force of your footsteps. However, his shoes were cheaply made, the rubber on the soles was too stiff and wouldn't make a difference no matter how well he could control his steps. Yiwan advised him, "You've just learned it, so you can only walk silently. Remember, don't run, you're not yet able to eliminate your footsteps when you run." "Yes, I'll keep that in mind," Qin Chen replied. Yiwan glanced at the soles of his feet. "According to what you said, you'll be in a mountain when you return. If you've never hiked barefoot before, I'm afraid your feet will be mangled bloody after the night." Qin Chen shook his head, "It's no worry. The wounds will heal sooner or later. It's good that you're able to be hard on yourself, but after everything is dealt with, you should still buy a pair of proper shoes as soon as possible," said Yiwan. "Is there anything else you want to ask?" For this battle, the most crucial lesson for me is actually the sneak attack. Why was it only taught at the end? Qin Chen was curious. Sneak attack is not some easy mode in virtual games, where the enemies just stupidly stand there waiting to be killed like NPCs until you're finished with all of them. Once you kill the second person, there's a high probability of getting discovered, Yi Wan explained. The remaining 3 will know of your existence, and they'll use all kinds of means to take you down. You have no choice but to fight head-on. That will be the most dangerous moment for you. It's easy to kill the first 2 people by sneak attack when the enemies are not yet aware of you, so I allocated the shortest time to teach you to conceal your tracks. Using most of the time to teach you close combat is because you are in most danger after their comrades find you. But, Qin Chen suddenly spoke, I don't plan on risking my life for other people's sake. If it's too dangerous, perhaps I'll give up. I support you on this point, Yi Wan said. In this world, your own life is the most important. If you just want to save your underling and tablemate, betting your life is not worth it. But you have to understand, if hot-bloodedness is something you can control, it will no longer be called as such. Sometimes, only after directly facing the matter will you finally understand your own choice. Yi Wan continued, the boss said you have hot blood running through your bones, just like how you dared to play chess against him the first day you came here. It's something that you possess, neither can it be forgotten, nor can it be erased. Do you remember that game of chess you played with the boss? It's not that the pawns who crossed the river didn't want to turn back, but they just simply couldn't. Qin Chen sank into thought. Meanwhile, Yi Wan moved a chair from the reading area and put it in front of Qin Chen. Curiously, Qin Chen asked, what is this for? Yi Wan pondered and said, soon, you will. No, you'll understand it in 2 days. Yi Wan told him, there's one more thing the boss didn't say, so I'll take the liberty to say it in his stead. What is it? Wondered Qin Chen. Yi Wan smiled, come back alive. Countdown 00.05.00. The last 5 minutes. Qin Chen stood in front of Lu Dezhu and questioned him, repeat the 2 things I told you. Lu Dezhu recited nervously, first, let all the students escape after returning. Second, if there's no way to escape, find out who was the first to be taken alone by the thugs. Right, did you recall any detail in these past 2 days? For example, who kept checking their phone and sending texts, or who went to the toilet in the middle of the way, asked Qin Chen. In a weak voice, Lu Dezhu answered, they've all been to the toilet, and everyone checked their phones quite often. Boss, I was only focused on playing games at that time, I really didn't pay attention to other things. Qin Chen sighed. If it weren't because he had no better choice, he would have never taken this guy as an underling. Remember, the thugs definitely want to know about your secret. But you've got to know that the moment they figure it out will be the moment you die. Qin Chen coldly continued, this time you've made an inexcusable mistake. The next time you come back, I'll help you get reacquainted with the cruelty of this world. Of course, that is if you can survive. After speaking, he glanced at the time on his arm. Countdown, 00.00.01. Return. Within the darkness were the sounds of drumbeats and merry laughter. The time that was isolated and suspended in the outer world finally began to tick again. The previous second, he was inside the dark confinement room. The next second, the world had been dyed an orange-red color by the bonfire, its light and shadow rapidly oscillating. Lu Dezhu opened his eyes widely. He looked at the bonfire in front of him, then at the jubilant crowd around him, and found it rather difficult to adapt. Darkness was separated from the light, suspense was separated from joy. Even Lu Dezhu himself seemed to be separated from these smiling classmates. It was as if someone in his brain was reminding him. Danger. He remembered what Qin Chen had said, stood up immediately, and roared, run. Everyone, run. We're in danger. However, the scenario he envisioned did not come true. Instead of running amok in all directions to escape, everyone just stared at him blankly. They couldn't understand why Lu Dezhu, who was chatting and laughing just a moment ago, suddenly had panic and fear written all over his face. Only Hu Xiaoniu reacted swiftly, because for the other students, their time was continuous and consistent. But for the time travelers, they have already spent 2 days in the inner world. Therefore, Lu Dezhu did not warn them out of nowhere, but had gone through some particular circumstances in the inner world. Hu Xiaoniu got up and asked, "Brother Lu, what happened?" Lu Dezhu squeezed out his way from the students around him as he spoke, "If you don't leave now, it'll be too late. The thugs are going to surround this place. Forget it, if you guys won't leave, I'll leave." But even after he explained it clearly, the other students were still perplexed. Hu Xiaoniu's expression changed. He signaled Zhang Tianjin with a wink and quickly followed after Lu Dezhu. However, just as they reached the gate, 2 middle-aged men in police uniforms asked, "Students, where are you going to looking all frightened like that?" Lu Dezhu grew ecstatic upon seeing the police uniforms. "Officers, there are thugs around here." The 2 uniform-clad men looked at each other, and then took out guns from their waistbands, respectively stepping forward and pressing the muzzle against Lu Dezhu and Hu Xiaoniu's chests. One of them softly chuckled, "Is that so? Why don't I see them?" The other coldly stared down Hu Xiaoniu, "Ask for help and you'll get shot to death, go back." Terrified, Hu Xiaoniu looked down at the gun aimed on his chest. It had a silencer. Chapter 86. 7 Criminals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In High City, Hu Xiaoniu often goes to the legal shooting ranges, so he has seen this before, and heard a bit about it from the shooting range instructor. Not to mention how these criminals get their hands on guns, just smuggling silencers into the nation would be hard enough. Even smugglers rarely sell such things. Moreover, most guns fitted with silencers were not silent at all, unlike those in the movies. At most, they would reduce the noise level from 140 dB to 120 dB. Not a very significant change. Silencers were exaggerated by all those films throughout the years. However, some specifically crafted guns with subsonic bullets can indeed minimize the sound of gunfire. The Glock 34, possessed by the criminals right now, was one of them. Hu Xiaoniu realized that their opponents were extremely professional, and likely used to be foreign professional mercenaries. Lu Dezhu was desperate. Everything came about too fast. Boss told him that there were criminals, but he wasn't told that they would be in police uniforms. Hu Xiaoniu took a deep breath and said, "Do as they say." The 3 of them returned to the yard at gunpoint. Meanwhile, 5 others with guns at the back door took control of the waiter, the manager, and 2 Kunlun members of Yunshang Inn, and walked out of the hotel building. These people acted faster than Qin Chen had expected. Before midnight, they already mapped out this entire place and were waiting until after they returned from transmigration to start. They chose to take action after returning to avoid Kunlun leaking information in the inner world and buying more time. Several girls screamed. One of the criminals pulled the trigger and the bullet struck right into a Kunlun member's lower leg. The Kunlun member fell but clutched his teeth hard and didn't make a sound. Dioviko the criminal then turned the gun toward Hu Xiaoniu and Lu Dezhu. He then said coldly, "Shut up. Or else, all your classmates are going to die right now, and many innocent people will as well. Look, this comrade from Kunlun knows this very well. He knew that screaming would attract other people, but on this mountain, no one can save him. Getting more people here will just increase casualties. Our fellow comrade knows very well that the people who can save you will arrive in 6 hours at the earliest. So everyone, please keep calm to avoid unnecessary troubles." The Kunlun member who fell closed his eyes. The extreme pain caused a thin layer of sweat on his forehead, but he still didn't make a sound. At this time, a criminal wearing a black coat stood in front of the students and said with a smile, "Very nice to see you here on Laojun Mountain. I'm not interested in ordinary people. I just want to find the time travelers among you and leave with them. So, please cooperate, alright. If everyone cooperates, this won't take long. In the crowd, Wang Yun suddenly said, don't panic. Don't let Hu Xiaonyo and the others die. Hu Xiaonyo and Zhang Tianjin looked at each other. No one knows what they were thinking. Lu Dezhu only had one thought in his mind. There are more than 5 criminals, the boss was mistaken. The students were terrified, but the fear of the guns and the threat to their classmates' life kept some sense in them. Some were sobbing quietly. The screaming from earlier seemed to have alerted people outside the courtyard. In the house, next door, the owner of BB, who was preparing food for dishes, wiped his hands on his apron and walked out the yard. He stood on the road in front of his door and looked toward the neighboring house. A man in a police uniform was standing at the door, as if he was on duty. The curious restaurant owner walked over and asked, "Officer, what's happening here?" The middle-aged man in a police uniform answered, "Someone was drunk here." "All right, stop watching, go back." "Oh. Oh, okay." The owner nodded and was about to return to his house. As he walked, he felt something was wrong. The man clutched his phone and was about to call the police as soon as he get back. But before he got back to his doorsteps, he felt a blade stabbing into his body. It went in through his ribs and ripped diagonally to his heart and lungs. A hand wearing a black leather glove tightly covered his mouth and dragged him into Yunshangyin. Immediately, a criminal in the police uniform returned outside and closed the doors. His hand was placed next to his waist. At this time, everyone in Yunshangyin was gathered in the backyard. Some students were trembling in fear as the criminals started collecting their phones with 2 black plastic bags. The criminals even remembered to check every phone to make sure it was turned off before throwing it into the bag. Lu Dezhu, Hu Xiaonyo, and Zhang Tianjin were also pushed back toward the crowd, and a criminal with a scar on his face opened up a bag in front of them. The 3 of them took out their phones obediently, but the criminal didn't walk away and stared at Hu Xiaonyo coldly. Hu Xiaonyo sighed in his heart. He took out another phone from his left pocket and threw it into the plastic bag. The criminal sneered and pushed the 3 into the crowd. The man in the black coat walked to Lu Dezhu and smiled as he said, "I'll give you one more chance. Tell me how you suddenly found out about our plans and know exactly that we're surrounding this place." Lu Dezhu trembled with his mouth shut. Once in a blue moon, he had some guts. The criminal smiled, "You aren't going to tell me. Then, let me guess. Outside of Yunshangyin, you still have a time traveler partner, right?" Lu Dezhu realized that even when the man knew the truth, he wasn't worried at all. Could it be that they got more trump cards not yet revealed? Or, they must have more people hiding somewhere. At this very moment, Qin Chen was standing in the room, silently. He was holding the switchblade he brought back, and behind him was Jiang Shui, who also just returned. Qin Chen heard vaguely the sound but didn't realize that it was the sound of a silenced pistol. However, the owner of the BB they were staying in never returned after he left. Looking at the blade in his hand, Jiang Shui realized something. "Xiao Chen, what are you going to do?" Qin Chen took off the shoes on his feet and turned to go out. "Aunt Jiang Shui, please take care of Xiao Yun and wait here. Lock the door and don't go out. Don't worry, I will be fine. Maybe I can help you with something. I have a mechanical arm." Jiang Shui said from behind. Qin Chen suddenly turned and looked directly in her eyes, "But you don't have fighting experience. Trust me, I'll be back." After that, he disappeared outside the door. Chapter 87. 3 more. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the mountain, the wind was blowing. Laojun Mountain stood at a height of more than 2,000 meters above sea level, located within the Funyo mountain range. The mountain wind at night was strong and freezing. The fog was condensing in the air. By dawn, a layer of water vapor would coat all of the outdoor furniture. Someone threw a new block of firewood into the bonfire inside the yard, and the flames burned darker. The flickering fire was refracted in the slowly flowing fog, like a wonderful midnight light show. There was a young man holding a knife in the shadows. He stood silently between the interlacing mist and darkness, sizing up the sole thug outside the gate. It wasn't until this very moment that he, at last, understood the words Yuan told him. Life was truly very fragile, regardless of how significant a person might be, they would die with a single stab through the heart. Yet, killing was anything but easy. Because what you had to face was the most malicious thing in the world. Qin Chen wordlessly tied a stolen scarf to his face. The signal at the top of the mountain was intermittent, so in order to ensure the smoothness of their operation, the thugs had walkie-talkies pinned on their left chests. Qin Chen counted in his heart. Every 10 minutes, the thug would lower his head and press the walkie-talkie to answer something. A gust of wind suddenly blew by, and the bonfire piled up with firewood abruptly grew vigorous, casting the world outside the yard with a bright light. Hiding in a corner, Qin Chen saw that the thug seemed to have perceived something due to the firelight. He peered at Qin Chen's direction with doubts written on his face, slowly approaching close. Qin Chen's heart tightened. But at this moment, Li Tongyan actually appeared outside the gate of the inn. She stood at the door and timidly asked, "Uncle Police, have you seen my mother?" The thug was stunned for a second. "Your mother? I haven't seen her." "Come here, Uncle will accompany you to look for your mother, all right." In an instant, he suddenly realized something was wrong. An ambush. The gangster subconsciously raised his left hand, waving his baton as his right hand reached for his waist, about to draw his gun. The bonfire light swayed past the fence. The young man within the mist had soundlessly arrived beside him. Close at hand, a knife's distance away. Qin Chen swiftly ducked to avoid the baton, dashing in front of the thug alongside the whistling of the mountain wind. He swung his dagger at the hand that was about to draw the gun. Knowing he couldn't reach it, the thug shrank back. The young man's blade was pointing down, the thug instinctively moved both of his arms downward, trying to grab the young man's hand. Seemingly having predicted the action, Qin Chen took a small step back to let his opponent's hand and baton hit the empty air. Not good. The thug looked up in astonishment into the darkness. But he could only see the boy's exposed eyes, coldly staring at him. Just when he thought the ferocious young man had exhausted his moves, the dagger once again penetrated the mist through the gap between his arms. Breathe. Li Shutong said that the most important thing in a battle between beasts was breathing. It was the key to keeping your body's oxygen level in check, the key to stealing your will. Once you understood the importance of breathing, you would be in control of yourself, and in turn, in control of everything. To be a hunter or prey, the choice was yours. In a flash, fire patterns bloomed on the edges of Qin Chen's scarf mask. It was like all of his power was rushing to accumulate in his right hand, passing to the tip of the knife and ruthlessly piercing into the spleen of the thug. The thug's eyes were aghast. What happened within this short instance? From the start to the end, the masked boy's movements smoothly glided like flowing water, as if everything had been well accounted for. The youth knew that he would swing the police baton, knew he wouldn't dare to draw his gun after the feint, and knew the trajectory his arms would take in retaliation. He knew everything, so he dodged all of his attacks, not giving him any chance to land a hand. It was only until the dagger plunged into his spleen that the two of them made physical contact. In this psychological game of close combat, his every step was within the calculation of the opponent. As if he had acted in a script written by the young man. His ending had already long been inscribed. Knowing he was running out of time, the thug struggled to reach for his walkie-talkie. But the young man shoved hard against his body, pinning him to the wall. Qin Chen covered his mouth with his left hand, his right hand vigorously twisting the knife. The thug wanted to struggle using his mechanical limbs, but the intense pain was transmitted into his brain, blocking nearly all of his working mind. In the human body, the spleen was an organ used to store blood. Instantaneously, a large amount of blood gushed out of the thug's ruptured spleen and flowed down the dagger to Qing Chen's hand. The fresh blood was warm. In the cold night, its rapidly vanishing temperature reminded Qing Chen just what exactly death was. He only pulled out the dagger after the thug's breathing and heartbeat had stopped. The masked boy stood in front of the corpse, gasping for breath. It was unclear what he was thinking about. Blood dripped from the drooping tip of the dagger in his hand, drop by drop onto the concrete ground. So this was what it felt like to kill a person. Qing Chen was panting not because of exhaustion or lack of air, but because of the inexplicable fear and panic in his heart. He finally realized why Li Shuang said he must use a knife for his first kill. If you kill someone with a gun, a shot from a few dozen meters away would take his life. Under that situation, the distance would haze your emotion and reaction. Rather than killing a person, what you did would feel more like hitting a target. You couldn't see the blood, couldn't feel the heartbeat gradually disappearing. You would also fail to feel a reverence for life. As a teacher, Li Shuang couldn't witness his student's first murder, but he had already taught Qing Chen the most important lesson. How to revere life. "Brother Qing Chen," Li Tongyun apprehensively called to him. The voice pulled Qing Chen back to reality as if a hand was tightly pulling his sleeve before he fell into the abyss. He turned to look at Li Tongyun, who was standing not far away. The little girl was in a wordless daze, stupefied by the scene that just transpired. She saw with her own eyes the masked boy's brutal killing, saw with her own eyes the loss of a life. Qing Chen came and squatted down in front of her. He didn't take off the scarf covering his face, only asking softly, "Are you afraid?" Li Tongyun nodded with tears in her eyes, "A bit." "Why did you come out, where's your mom?" asked Qing Chen. At this time, Jiang Shui ran downstairs in a hurry, seemingly looking for Li Tongyun. Even if Qing Chen was hiding his face, she could recognize the boy at a glance, because what he was using was her scarf. So when she found out Li Tongyun and Qing Chen were together, she immediately let out a sigh of relief. Jiang Shui walked to the door and explained to Qing Chen, "I went to the toilet just now, but when I came back, she was missing." "Xiaoyun, you really scared me." Li Tongyun lowered her head, "I just wanted to help brother Qing Chen." Qing Chen was surprised, turned out she appeared here not by coincidence, but to help him. He wanted to raise his hand to pat Li Tongyun's head, but then he remembered it was covered all over in blood, so he slowly retracted his arm. But before he could fully retract it, Li Tongyun reached out to grab his palm and put it on her head. "Brother Qing Chen, pay attention to safety, Mom and I will be waiting for you to come back." "Okay," Qing Chen smiled, "I'll do just that." After speaking, he asked for Jiang Shui's help to drag the corpse to the yard and then handed her the pistol on his waist. "I plan to sneak into Yunshangyan. Even with a silencer installed, it'll still attract attention the moment a shot is fired, so I'll give this to you." Jiang Shui shook her head, "Take it with you, you're in way more danger. Who cares about attracting attention when life and death are at stake, just shoot if you need to." Qing Chen was taken aback initially, then he chuckled and removed the gun holster from the corpse to fasten it around his own waist. Although he didn't know how to use a gun and would alert the other thugs to besiege him if he opened fire, it was definitely better to have a weapon than not having one. Li Shuang said a knight must use a blade to kill for the first time, and he had already done that. His next kill shouldn't be counted alongside the first. So he could use a gun. Qing Chen patted Li Tongyun's small head, "This time you really have to listen well. Wait for me to come back." "Okay," Li Tongyun nodded. At this moment, a voice rang out from the walkie-talkie on the corpse's chest. "Start counting now, 1. The voices of the thugs relayed coldly. 2, 3. 4. A short pause followed. Qing Chen immediately used his breathing technique and perfectly reproduced the thug's voice from his memory. 5. He was about to turn off the walkie-talkie when a new count was transmitted from the speaker. 6, 7. 8. Qing Chen was jolted by a shock. There were 3 more thugs. Chapter 88. The Art of Harvesting Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everything that happened today seems to be telling Qin Chen an undeniable truth. The outcome of a battle is determined by the future and cannot be calculated with past information. If not, the person would be on a one-way trip to death. Kun Luen clearly wanted 5 criminals before, and Qin Chen only saw 5 as well, but now, there were 8. No wonder they controlled 2 Kun Luen members so easily. The team was still growing. Many people in the world were willing to risk their lives for money. Yesterday, Lin Xiaoxiao was chatting with him. Lin Xiaoxiao was squatting on a chair as he said, "Qin Chen, when you return to the outer world, remember to not trust anyone because individual interests can change so many relationships. Humans seek profits, and never underestimate human greed." Guess who invented the communication device that Lu Dezhu is using right now? Qin Chen guessed, a spy. Lin Xiaoxiao smiled and shook his head. Nope, it was secretly developed by 2 stock traders from City 1 who wanted to avoid getting caught for insider trading. Look how greed even led to technological advancements. Right now, Qin Chen had the feeling that more and more people of the outer world would step to the darker side driven by profits. Countless people needed this opportunity to change their lives. He pocketed the walkie-talkie and walked into the darkness after waving to Jiang Shui. Jiang Shui squatted down and hugged Li Tongyun. "Did that scare you just now?" Li Tongyun thought about it and said, "I was at first, but after Brother Qin Chen patted my head, I'm not scared anymore." The little girl recalled Qin Chen's precision and determination at night and thought that Qin Chen's calmness was like performing an art. The art of harvesting life. The soles of human feet should be the softest of most animals. Fighting barefooted was harder than one could imagine. Even a tiny piece of gravel on the ground could make anyone feel a sharp pain. Even if there was even one possible alternative, Qin Chen wouldn't choose to fight barefooted. But there was none. Qin Chen quietly waited on a loquat tree by the road, using the dense canopy to hide his body. He also turned down the sound from the walkie-talkie to a minimum. The campfire in the yard would shine a light through gaps between the branches from time to time. This was the best spot that he could think of. The tree was tall and a good distance away from Yinshangyin. 6 on the yard, and 1 at the back door, Qin Chen muttered to himself. To eliminate 7 people at once wasn't realistic right now, especially when most of them were grouped together. He looked down at the bloodstains on the soles of his feet. Who would know what his feet would look like after tonight? In the yard, Lu Dezhu timidly sat on the ground as the leader of the criminals was pointing a gun at him, questions about something. More than 40 hostages were grouped tightly together, and 6 of the criminals surrounded them firmly, ensuring that no one would escape. To Qin Chen's surprise, he saw a Kun Luen member lying on the ground with sweat wetting his forehead. The gunwood on the young man's leg was particularly eye-catching. Blood was still coming out from it, dyeing the cement floor with a dark purple color. Even at this painful moment, his right hand was still beside his pants pocket, and his index finger was tapping rhythmically, trying to notify the outside world. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. His index finger was tapping out quick, short tones, and his middle finger was tapping out slow, long tones. It seemed to be Morse code, but Qin Chen didn't know who he was messaging. Another teammate. Qin Chen took note of the code's rhythm and turned his eyes to the courtyard. At this time, one of the criminals was looking around in the crowd and smiled as he said something to another criminal. Then, he grabbed Wang Yun's hair as he pulled her out of the crowd. Wang Yun was dragged to the ground with legs kicking, but eventually, she was dragged into the inn. The classmates looked fearfully at this. Hu Xiaoniu and Zhang Tianjin wanted to stand up a couple of times but were forced to sit down by the dark and cold gunpoints. An unhurt Kun Luen member rose in anger, but the criminal next to him gave him a solid punch on the stomach. He fell like a shrimp but couldn't make a sound. Aside from that, no one dared to resist. But no one could criticize their ethics right now. When humans were in danger, protecting themselves was a natural instinct. The students weren't professionally trained, and fear was natural. However, they didn't know that the criminals never planned to let any ordinary person leave here alive in the first place. Qing Chen looked at all this expressionlessly and didn't intervene. He felt that this was illogical since the criminals were all well-trained and organized fighters. Grabbing a girl into a room at this time seemed way too stupid. And they obviously weren't stupid. After a while, the criminal came out of the inn and patted his companion on the shoulder. "It's your turn." Hearing this, the students all retreated in fear. Seeing the criminal looking through the crowd with a smile on his face, the girls all lowered their heads to avoid eye contact, as if that was enough to be not seen. The next moment, his glance landed on Nangengchen. The criminal squeezed through the crowd and dragged Nangengchen to bring to the house. Qing Chen looked at this scene in shock. He finally figured out one thing. No more waiting. He didn't even know where the criminal at the back door was hiding, but he couldn't wait anymore. This was the best chance. Yinshanyan was built on a mountain, so it wasn't on flat ground but leaning against a slope with forests extending from its sides. A criminal was leaning against the back door, smoking. The red color of the cigarette was flashing in the darkness, and the sizzling of the tobacco burning could be heard in the quiet night. Unlike the criminal at the front door, he already had the Glock 34 with a silencer in his hand to react faster. Suddenly in the darkness, a sound of gravel falling on the ground erupted. However, the criminal's first reaction was to look in the opposite direction of the sound, and the muzzle pointed to the place where the sound came from. No matter which side, he could find the best way to deal with the situation. No one. His tight muscles relaxed slowly. The criminal threw away the cigarette butt and searched around the darkness with his pistol, trying to find the source of the sound. At this time, a voice came from the walkie-talkie, "Report, 1, 2, 3, the criminal pressed down on the walkie-talkie and said, 4. His focus was on the walkie-talkie and was somewhat distracted. He released and looked around again. Suddenly, the criminal's pupils suddenly contracted, but his mouth was already covered by a hand from behind. The cold dagger stabbed into his spleen from the back waist and stopped at his lungs. Then, he heard someone from behind him who pressed down a walkie-talkie and said, 5. The hand was released, and the criminal's mouth only made some gasping sounds. The counting continued. 6, 7, 8. No one found out that 2 of their companions had already died. Chapter 89. Courage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Inside Yinshanyan, Nangengchen was a crying mess as he was dragged to a room on the second floor. The bonfire light swayed outside the window, but he felt like he was falling into hell. Nangengchen wailed, "Brother, I beg you please don't touch me. Really, I think Hu Xiaonyo and Zhang Tianjin look much better, you should go for them." He sobbed while secretly putting all his might to exert his bowel. He had read it on the net before. At this kind of critical moment, if you manage to crap your pants in time, you might be able to ruin the assaulter's appetite and keep your safety intact. He just never thought he would end up using this trick for himself one day. However, contrary to his imagination, the sound of unfastening belt didn't come. The thug was wearing a black leather jacket, his hair neatly shaved in a buzz cut. On his neck, a black dragon tattoo spread all the way to his chin, making him look fierce and freaky. The thug slowly took off his gloves, revealing the rugged mechanical limbs underneath. He moved his fingers around, letting out creaking noises that seemed to come from age as they clenched and unclenched. It made his teeth sore. The thug stood opposite Nangengchen with a frigid stare. Only when the sobbing gradually subsided did he calmly ask at last, "Boy, I'm not interested in men. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and you're gonna answer it. I'll let you live if you cooperate, understand?" "Understand, I understand." Nangengchen frantically nodded. "What's your identity in the inner world?" asked the thug. Nan Gingchen was stunned. He thought he was taken to this room to be defiled. He didn't expect the thug to ask about his identity in the inner world. This was completely different from his assumption. It seemed that the thug's earlier actions were merely a pretense to fool the others. But he couldn't figure out why was there such a sudden turning point and how the thug knew he was a time traveler. He had obviously concealed the fact very well, no one knew about it. The thug poked his forehead with the muzzle of his gun. I asked you a question. Nan Gingchen tearfully spoke. I'm a hacker, muttered the thug with some annoyance. It had to be said that knowledge would not be inherited upon transmigrating to the inner world, so in their eyes, time travelers in the technical category were the most worthless because they only had the status without the abilities. Moreover, if the person wasn't skilled, this kind of identity might become a drag. The thug continued with his questions. Which city do you live in? City 18, replied Nan Gingchen. Which district? The first district, Nan Gingchen hurriedly added, I just moved there. The thug whistled. Turns out you're a rich man living in the first district. Why did you just move there? To his own chagrin, Nan Gingchen said, I've just become a kept man. The thug was dumbfounded. What the heck was this all about? But he kept on asking, what's the current holographic projection displayed in the first district's Chishui Square? Nan Gingchen answered, it's 3 killer whales jumping out of the water. The thug took some time to think before pressing the walkie-talkie on his chest. Boss, I've confirmed that he's a time traveler living in the first district of City 18, let's clean up the scene now. After speaking, he let go of the walkie-talkie and moved to haul Nan Gingchen out of the room. When the thug leaned over to grab him, a masked boy who was previously obscured behind his body appeared in Nan Gingchen's field of vision. The boy covered his face with a scarf, but Nan Gingchen could still see the fiery red lines spreading from under the scarf to the corners of his eyes. He didn't know when this boy appeared. Both him and the thug never noticed him approaching. No footsteps, no breathing. Nothing at all. The thug also seemed to perceive something strange from Nan Gingchen's expression, but his body had already been unable to move. The spleen was the blood bank of the human body. Once it was broken by an external force, the victim would immediately lose blood and die. The speed was second only to a slash on the carotid artery. The thug could feel his body rapidly cooling down, he could even hear the sound of his blood dripping to the ground. Blood slowly foamed out of his mouth. He wanted to press for his walkie-talkie. But someone had already reached out a hand from behind to take the walkie-talkie off his chest. Who are you? Asked Nan Gingchen in a daze. Qin Chen calmly looked at him. You don't have to pretend to not recognize me. Come with me, I don't have time to talk to you now. Got it, Brother Chen, Nan Gingchen replied in excitement. Qin Chen was not at all surprised that Nan Gingchen could recognize himself. They had been classmates since the first year of high school, and after the division of liberal arts and science classes, they had also become desk-mates. The two teenagers who persevered through misery had always been best friends. Although Qin Chen could cover his face and mess up his hair on purpose, Nan Gingchen only needed a glance at his eyes and profile to determine Qin Chen's identity. As Nan Gingchen followed behind Qin Chen, he animatedly mumbled, I didn't expect that you'd come to save me. If you didn't show up, I might be captured by them. But when Qin Chen planned to leave with Nan Gingchen through the back door, the sound of machines suddenly reverberated from outside. Someone shouted, run. They're gonna silence us all. Qin Chen abruptly turned his head to look out the window. That was the sound of guns with silencers installed. The bonfire was like a sea of flames reflecting the sky, and the screams of the students were like the water at boiling point. He took out the gun from his waist and walked to the window. The owner and staff of Yunshangyan were lying in a pool of blood, and the students were haphazardly fleeing in fright. It was unknown when the 2 Kunlun members fell from the bullets, or when the gate of Yunshangyan was opened, allowing the students to escape in the chaos. A Kunlun member lay on his back on the cold concrete floor, his torso a mess of blood and flesh. His eyes were opened. The other Kunlun member knelt crookedly beside the gate. His eyes were closed. He was holding a gun in his hand, and next to him was a thug who had long been dead, with the corpse of another thug at a distance further away. The two thugs were shot 4 times in total. The Kunlun member was covered in blood, and it was impossible to tell how many times he had been shot. It looked like he had sacrificed himself to open the gate and throw a lifeline for the students. At this moment in time, the students were struggling to rise up and run outside. Qin Chen didn't know what transpired in that short instance. Even with increased brainpower, he was still somehow unable to react. By the time he came to the window, what had to happen had already happened. So many people died within just a few breaths. Qin Chen quietly looked at the 2 corpses drenched in blood. Because he didn't witness it with his own eyes, his emotions were a little slow to come. There was no grief, nor was he touched. It was just that there was something suddenly blocking his chest, and he himself didn't know what it was. The remaining thugs unexpectedly did not chase after the students, opting to tie up Lu Dezhu, Hu Xiaonyo, and Zhang Tianjin with grim expressions, intending to mix in behind the students and leave with the time travelers. Yes, their targets were the time travelers. Since their plan had been disrupted, it was impossible to silence all the other students. The best option for them was to promptly stop their losses. A voice came from the walkie-talkie. I don't know where 5 is, he might have met an accident. 3, you and 4 bring down those 2 from upstairs, we'll meet in the parking lot. 3 and 4 were already dead. Qin Chen silently observed everything, and he recalled what Yuan told him. If hot-bloodedness is something you can control, it will no longer be called as such. Sometimes, only after directly facing the matter will you finally understand your own choice. Wait here, and remember, I never showed up here tonight. If I don't come back, you don't need to tell my parents, spoke Qin Chen in a low voice before walking outside. In fact, he didn't want to take any more risks. After all, Nangingchen had been rescued, and this was a good opportunity for him to leave. But Qin Chen was thinking, had he really tried his best? If he left now, for his whole life, wouldn't he recall the day he cowered each time he fought against someone else? For a moment, he felt that what Mom Yi said was truly right. The brave pawn who crossed the river and was stained with blood could no longer turn back. Regardless of the rules, the mandates, the gains, and losses. That was courage.